Hi, I'm Leticia Lopez, Lopez Stockwell. So where do I begin? I've always grown up in the church, since I was younger, growing up in an apostolic church with my grandparents and them taking me to church. But I really didn't know the Lord like I do now. I was always the kid that kind of was the bad kid they called. I went through a lot growing up. Seen a lot of violence, abuse in my life. As a kid, I was the oldest of 5 siblings, so I kind of like sheltered them from a lot of the stuff that I seen. So I kind of always had to be the protector. I felt, growing up. My mom did her best, my dad. I know we've all struggled with stuff in our lives, but I was sexually abused at like 9 years old. That's kind of where became the angry kid, the one that wanted to beat everybody up. And so I started getting in a lot of trouble at school during that time. And then got into drugs probably about the age of 12. I decided to just experiment, and it led me down a path that was really, really dark. During the whole process of my drug addiction, I was addicted to meth for 22 years, about 22 years. I probably got sober about 8 months throughout those 22 years. So now it's been a blessing that I'm sober. But during those years, I had 5 children, and they all got taken away from me. They were all put in the system, which I've had family that was able to care for them. But basically, my younger 3 children were small when they were taken away, so I kind of don't really know them too well. I'm barely getting that relationship back, but it was a struggle being out there. Once I lost them, I felt like I lost everything. So I was out on the streets, homeless in California for years, running the streets. I thought I had all this protection on the streets because in the middle of the night, walking down the streets as a female at 3 o'clock in the morning, nowhere to go. I was always protected, and I never I always thought it was me and my own power, why I was being protected, and it's just nobody wants to mess with me. But really, now I realize, that it was always God. It was always God protecting me, even in my darkest times. The times when I felt hopeless. I can say I remember an experience where, now looking back, I knew it was God, but it was about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was about to do something really, really foolish because I was hungry and I hadn't eaten for days, and I was watching this man, and I was gonna rob him, but because I was very I was just at a disappointment in my life where I was hopeless. I was very hopeless that morning. I remember just thinking I've been walking for days. My feet hurt. I don't have nothing to eat. And I asked this man for $1, and I seen him at the park. And I always had this pride about asking for money from anybody. But that day I had asked for $1, and he suggested that I do something, bad for it, something sexually. So I just looked at him and I was like, no. So I was like, I'm gonna take this money from him, violently. And I remember sitting there, and I was like, when he comes back around because he's walking around the park, and there was nobody else around us. It was sun's barely coming up, and I'm watching him, and I'm waiting for him to come back around, and then out of nowhere, some man pops up behind me, and he says, God could change your life like he did for me. And he's just like, I turn around, I look at him, I'm like, where did he come from, And I know that was an angel God sent. God sent an angel to stop me from that split second, because I could have made a decision that was going to end up in prison. I'm surprised I haven't ended up in prison. I did end up in prison. But throughout my life, I was very, I ran from God forever. I've known God all my life, but I ran from him. And I felt like I wasn't worthy of his love or anything because of what I was out there doing. The devil kept me trapped, Basically, I was shooting up meth for years in abandoned houses, the conditions that were just... Now I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I survive that? I don't even... But I know it was God. I know it was God. I had my way of coming back to the Lord. This is where He used my oldest son, because God uses people to help, and I remember my oldest son, he's seen me on the streets, and he lived about an hour away from me. And he said, Mom, can you come and spend Thanksgiving with us? It was about a week till Thanksgiving, and I was like, okay, I could go over there. I had nowhere else to be. I was on the streets, and he took me home with him, and he was 19 at the time. He was very young, took me home with him and his girlfriend, and I spent a week there sleeping, coming off of that meth, and just really didn't spend much time with him, but I got to sleep, and then he's like, Mom, why don't you stay another week, for after Thanksgiving? And he had this all planned out, and I was like, okay, so I stayed, but I was so wanting to go back to the streets, that streets were always calling me, and the drugs were calling me, but I stayed another week, and about 2 weeks into it, my mind was more clear, and I could kind of understand what was going on. So I spent a little time with him, got to spend Thanksgiving with him, and it was wonderful, and then he finally gets that question, Mom, why don't you go to New Mexico? Because I'm in California at the time. He's like, why don't you go to New Mexico? Because my grandma was here. My grandma always bring me to church. So I was like, no, I don't want to go over there. And he's like, Mom, you should, And good thing I did come, because 2 days after I got here, I was hospitalized with a bad blood infection because I was using needles that were dirty needles, and I got a bad blood infection, and I almost died, and I would have died on the streets in California, so God knew exactly what He was doing. And after that, I was like, my grandma kept taking me to church and all this, and she got to see me get sober, and before she passed away, I spent a year with her here. So God knew exactly what He was doing when He brought me to New Mexico, and since then I haven't looked back. And I'm pushing forward. I have my struggles, at times. I get a little emotional. I struggle at times, but I know that it's because I am following the Lord, because it seems like sometimes man, why is it so hard? But it is because he's putting us through tests, I believe, to become stronger. Because the things that I went through in the past, I wouldn't be who I am today, And I'm actually, I could say I love who I am today, And I want to share this testimony with people and let them know that God can change, even the worst of us, because I was the worst, I was a crazy person on the streets, talking to myself. I don't know, half of the time. After all those years that I was out there, I don't remember most of them, but I do know that I was pretty crazy, because people would come and they want to pray for me on the streets, and I would run from them, and I was always running from God, and I'm just grateful today that God has given me my family back, Like I said at the beginning, I had lost my kids, and I didn't think I would ever have anything to do with them, because the devil kept lying to me all those years. I let them in my head and let them believe that my kids didn't want nothing to do with me, that they were better off. And I always thought I was going to die in a trap house, and I was okay with that, But today I'm just grateful that I'm alive, and I have a grandbaby, and God's just blessed me with so much, and family has been everything to me, And for me being away from them for so long, it was like, whoa, but God's restoring everything, because I am following Him, and I'm grateful for that today. And I just hope that my story can impact somebody, and that that it's not easy, but it's worth it. It is very much worth it, and God will always have your back no matter what.